I am a 25-year-old woman with a 29-year-old sister, and our relationship has never been particularly close, primarily due to the unequal treatment we've experienced throughout our lives. Being the elder daughter, she always received more favorable treatment, which has been a constant sore point for me, even though I tried to convince myself that my perception was baseless. The accumulation of various experiences growing up confirmed that she was indeed the favored child. Family members invariably gave her the benefit of the doubt regardless of her actions, while I was often overlooked and not afforded the same leniency. This disparity created a lot of resentment and was difficult to cope with. To manage my mental health, I realized that the best course of action was to move out, which I did when I turned 18. This decision significantly improved my well-being, yet it didn't entirely resolve the underlying issues. After moving out, my sister tried to tarnish my reputation in front of my parents by falsely accusing me of substance abuse. My parents believed her without question, refusing to consider my innocence despite my willingness to take a drug test. This experience strained my relationship with them further, and I decided to go no contact with my parents for about 2 years. During this time, I focused on my career, my life, and my boyfriend, finding happiness without their influence. However, the situation changed drastically when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Initially, I didn't reach out to my parents during the lockdown's early months. But news of my father's hospitalization compelled me to step up as a dutiful daughter. Despite the past, I believe in treating people as I wish to be treated, not as they have treated me. This belief led me to reconnect with my parents during my father's hospital stay. Since then, we have been working on mending our relationship. Much to my sister's displeasure, I made it clear to her that I was committed to this reconciliation and wouldn't back down. Furthermore, when my parents faced financial difficulties, I decided to assist them to the best of my ability. It might seem naive, but I hoped that by being there for them in ways my sister wasn't, I could achieve a sense of equality in their eyes. I knew my sister was waiting for an opportunity to sabotage our renewed relationship, but my financial support helped solidify my standing with my parents. Whenever my sister attempted to cause trouble, my parents remained supportive and open-minded, recognizing my efforts and commitment. She didn't show up when they needed her, so there was no need for her to speak poorly of me. I must admit that I was aware they didn't want to upset me, knowing I might withdraw my support. Their precarious financial situation meant they needed all the help they could get. Some might view me as a bad person for this, but I was determined not to be treated like garbage anymore, and was willing to do whatever was necessary to avoid that. During this period, my boyfriend and I were doing well, and after our 4th anniversary, he proposed. I accepted, feeling like my life was finally looking up. My relationship with my parents was somewhat functional. My job was progressing nicely, and now I was engaged. Everything was meticulously planned, and I was thrilled. The only person who wasn't happy was my sister. She couldn't fathom why I should get married so young when she wasn't even married herself. However, my sister has never had a stable or long-lasting relationship. Her relationships barely lasted a year. It was no surprise she wasn't married. Her reasoning that I shouldn't get married because she wasn't sounded absurd, so I respectfully ignored her. The wedding was scheduled for a weekend to ensure everyone could attend. I sent invitations to my sister and my parents because despite everything, I genuinely wanted my family to be there. The wedding was a week ago last Saturday, and guess what happened? My parents didn't show up. You might think something major happened, but no. They didn't show up because my sister decided to host a lunch at her place on the same day, and my parents chose to attend her lunch over my wedding. Their behavior devastated me. It felt like a cruel joke because they didn't even inform me they wouldn't be coming. I waited for 30 minutes, hoping they would show up until my maid of honor showed me a post my sister made on social media. That's how I found out they weren't coming. They looked so happy sitting next to her as if she was their only daughter. At that moment, I decided I would no longer help them. I realized I was 7 years too late in cutting them off. But now was as good a time as any. After the wedding, I sent them a message clearly stating that I would never consider them my parents again. They had consistently chosen my sister over me, even when I stepped in where she failed. Their refusal to respect me was the final straw. I have stopped calling them mom and dad since that incident, and they are far from happy about it. They've bombarded me with numerous messages trying to justify their behavior, but I remain resolute. I have no intention of being kind to them, yet there is a part of me that feels like a huge jerk for treating them this way, which brings me here to ask, am I the asshole? Or am I just overthinking things? Update 1. Hey everyone. I deeply appreciate all the support you've shown. I apologize for the delay in updating you. I was away on my honeymoon. I returned yesterday and felt I should share how I'm feeling. Overall, I don't believe I'm the asshole, but reading your affirmations that I'm not the asshole, NTA, has truly lifted my spirits. Since the wedding, I've been ignoring my entire family because they've continued to message me online, insisting they did nothing wrong and that I'm overreacting. My parents are particularly upset about my refusal to finance their needs. They are acutely aware that my sister won't be able to cover any expenses because she doesn't have the means. Nevertheless, I am done being friendly with them. I resent that they made me feel this way. Update 2. It's been about 3 days since my last update. Yesterday, my mother showed up at my apartment. I didn't want to talk to her at all, but she had been waiting outside my place for hours, as my neighbors later informed me. I decided to let her in, which turned out to be a mistake. The moment the door closed, my mother began to berate me. She accused me of being a massive jerk for painting them as the villains. She argued that just because I'm married now, I shouldn't act like my husband is my entire family. She insisted that I should still treat my parents and sister as my family. I responded that her argument might hold some weight if she had ever treated me like family, but she never did. I was always made to feel worthless, and whenever I needed them, they were never there for me. I pointed out that she had chosen my sister over me on my wedding day, a day that should have been about me. However, my mother was so convinced of her righteousness that she couldn't see how her actions were hurtful. It was pathetic and sad to watch her behave this way. She couldn't comprehend that her actions were offensive. Instead, she insisted that I was the one overreacting, which I found infuriating. I told her to leave and never contact me again unless she was ready to acknowledge that she had been favoring my sister over me and was willing to change how she treated me. My mother called me crazy, and I told her she could leave and never come back if that's how she felt. Update 3. Hey everyone. It's been a while since I last reached out. Thank you to everyone who supported my decision to cut off my parents. I truly appreciate it. In my last update, I shared how my conversation with my mother ended. And since then, we haven't spoken. My father has been trying to contact me, but I've been ignoring him as well. My sister has messaged me on social media, telling me to grow up and stop overreacting. She claimed that the lunch was really important to her and that family members sometimes have to make sacrifices for each other. I told her, and my father, the same thing I told my mother, and have remained firm in my stance. While I do want a healthy relationship with my parents, I won't bear the entire burden unless they're willing to put in the effort. Opin NTA, honestly, you are my hero, because I'm in a similar situation with a family that blatantly shows favoritism. If I could leave, I would do the same thing you are doing. NTA, they don't deserve to be called mom and dad if they're not willing to be parents to you. Anyone who thinks otherwise can take a long walk off a short pier. Next story, my girlfriend, who is 23, and I, 25, have been dating for about 4 years. When I first introduced her to my friends, she hit it off really well with my cousin Dan, who is also 25. They shared a similar sense of humor and common interests. Watching her challenge him to a shot competition and getting him drunk on tequila was the highlight of our first New Year's together. It made me happy to see them become friends since Dan and I are very close. Dan started dating Joanna, 24, a year and a half ago, and they got engaged last December. Last week, Dan called and asked if I wanted to be the best man at his wedding. I enthusiastically agreed. During our conversation, I mentioned how excited my girlfriend was about the wedding, but then Dan got quiet. I asked if something was wrong, and he explained that he and Joanna decided to have a small wedding with only family and close friends, meaning no partners were allowed unless they were married or engaged. I got angry and asked how they could think of this rule without considering our relationship. Dan said he wanted my girlfriend there, but if they made an exception for us, others would expect it too. There was nothing he could do. When I told my girlfriend what happened, she was visibly hurt. 2 days ago, I texted Joanna asking if she and Dan had discussed our situation. She said she didn't want a stranger at their wedding and didn't consider my girlfriend's family, regardless of how serious our relationship is. I snapped and told Joanna that most of Dan's family, and therefore mine, see my girlfriend as more a part of the family than they see her, given she hasn't bothered to build relationships with relatives other than Dan's parents. Joanna got mad and told Dan what happened. He called me an asshole and said I had to apologize if I didn't want to be replaced as best man. I told him to go ahead and replace me, because I wouldn't be attending the wedding if my girlfriend wasn't invited. Dan hasn't spoken to me since, and my girlfriend keeps urging me to apologize because she doesn't want to be the reason I lose my relationship with my cousin. Am I the asshole? NTA. A wedding invitation is not a command. They have the right to make their choices, but you also have the freedom to decline. What kind of overwhelming flood of plus ones are they expecting at an already small wedding? That's the flimsiest excuse I've ever heard. This might be reasonable if you just met, or if you were a regular guest. But you've been with your girlfriend for 4 years, and you're the best man. Not allowing her to attend is particularly callous. They're essentially saying it's her or us, and your girlfriend wins simply by not engaging in the fight. They know her. She's not a stranger. But they're choosing to treat her like one. If they lose her, and you by extension, that's the choice they made. The groom's hesitation and reluctance to bring it up suggests he knows it's wrong and that this was likely the bride's decision, possibly out of jealousy. Keep your heart open, but you're not the one creating a rift in your friendship, Dan is. You exacerbated it by insulting the bride. But let this play out naturally. You may love Dan, but you'll never be able to compete with his demanding bride. Opinion NTA. You seem very serious about your relationship, and your family has accepted your girlfriend as part of them. The fact that your girlfriend got along so well with your cousin is likely the real issue. Joanna doesn't want her there. You're definitely not the asshole for defending your girlfriend. NTA. The rule against unmarried or unengaged couples is ridiculous and dismisses many perfectly valid relationships, including yours. If the bride doesn't want strangers at her wedding, she shouldn't invite people who might bring strangers. But it's their wedding, and they can make whatever rules they want. You are within your rights to not attend, and you're giving proper notice. So no, you're not the asshole here. Next story, I met my husband 7 years ago when my son was 4. We got pregnant with our daughter only 2 months after we started dating. She's his only biological child. Despite rushing into things, our relationship has been fantastic with hardly any issues, until recently. My son's 12th birthday is coming up soon, and we had always promised him a phone for his 12th birthday. He's been asking for one since he was 9 because all his friends had phones, and he felt left out. I felt terrible and wanted to cave in several times, but I didn't because my husband and I had already decided together that we would get him one at age 12. Now that his birthday is just around the corner, my son is extremely excited and eagerly anticipating getting a phone. He's fully expecting it as we've promised him many times when you're 12. Recently, while browsing online for phones with parental controls and other necessary features, my husband suddenly decided that he doesn't think our son is old enough for a phone and should wait until he's at least 15. I told him that was absolutely not happening, but listened to his reasoning to understand his perspective. He argued that he didn't want our son having access to any form of social media, feeling that getting him a phone would force him to grow up too quickly and expose him to the media and its potential pitfalls. I reiterated that we had made a deal with our son, and I wasn't going to break that promise. Although I don't completely agree with his reasoning, I didn't express that. Instead, I stood firm, emphasizing that we couldn't go back on our word. He continued to argue for a solid 30 minutes, insisting that our son doesn't need a phone. Finally, I told him that he has no say in this decision and that I am getting our son a cell phone. He snapped back, saying that it had better be a flip phone because he doesn't want our son on the internet. Since then, he hasn't spoken to me. Am I the asshole? NTA, sorry. But pushing the wait another 3 years after making your son wait 3 years will shatter any trust he has in both of you. It's better to make rules, use parental software effectively, and teach him responsibility rather than alienate him like this. NTA, all the other kids his age are going to have phones. Additionally, many modern middle school classrooms send out SMS reminders for homework, exams, and supplemental classroom information. Your husband needs to get with the times. 1993 was 30 years ago. What's he going to tell your kid when he's 15? Wait until you're 18? On top of that, refusing to give your kid any responsibility is a self-fulfilling prophecy that guarantees you'll have an irresponsible child. It's far better for him to get exposure to social media while he's still receptive to your guidance than to wait until he's in the I know better stage, where he'll completely ignore your warnings and stumble into trouble. NTA. You can limit access on a kid's phone, and he will still find a way to get on social media if he wants to. My 7-year-old, who has trouble reading, found a way to access the internet outside our home. The best approach is to teach them to be open with you when they find something disturbing and not to freak out at them for what they saw.